You are about to meet Rex, a 2-year-old German Shepherd the state of Texas had officially classified as a dangerous animal and marked for euthanasia at 7:15 the following morning. And you are about to meet Marcus Hale, a Navy SEAL Chief Petty Officer who had just come home from the worst deployment of his 20-year career. What happened between these two broken souls on that Tuesday morning in October has never been fully told until now. The story has been whispered about inside the veteran community. It has been shared between animal welfare workers over coffee. It has even made its way into a federal courtroom. But nobody has ever put the entire thing together in one place. That is what I am asking you to spend the next 32 minutes with me doing. Before I take you deeper into this story, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications right now. The next video I drop will make this one look tame. It involves a Marine, a kill pen horse, and a Category 5 hurricane. Comment below right now with what you think happened when Marcus walked into that kennel. I want your gut reaction before I tell you the truth. The morning Marcus Hale drove into El Paso County Animal Shelter was a Tuesday in mid-October, and the city was already baking under a desert sun that felt personal. The thermometer on the bank sign near the freeway exit read 93 degrees by 8:45 in the morning. The asphalt in the shelter parking lot shimmered in waves. The dust on the concrete smelled like old iron and sun-cooked gravel. The building itself was a long, low, beige structure with bars on the windows and a faded sign out front that had not been repainted in what looked like a decade. Marcus parked his black pickup truck in the second row. He shut off the engine. He sat there for a moment with his hands still on the steering wheel. He could feel his pulse in his wrists. He had not eaten breakfast. He had not slept more than 3 hours the night before. His boots still had a fine layer of dust on them from somewhere a long way from Texas. He had driven 47 minutes from his empty apartment across the east side of El Paso. He had driven because of a single photograph he had first seen on a veteran's Facebook page 3 days earlier. The photo showed a German Shepherd pressed into the back corner of a kennel. The dog's ears were torn. One eye was swollen, nearly shut. His ribs showed through matted black and tan fur like the wooden slats of a deck chair rotting in a yard. The caption under the photo read, 14 hours until scheduled euthanasia. No rescue has stepped forward. Please share. Marcus had stared at the photo for 9 minutes without moving. Then he had pressed print. Then he had taped the printout to his refrigerator. Then he had not been able to stop thinking about it for 72 straight hours. He had picked up his phone 11 times and put it back down. He had written 5 different messages to his old commanding officer and deleted all of them. He had driven past the shelter twice the day before without stopping in. And then, on that Tuesday morning, he had finally given up pretending he was fine. He had gotten into his truck. He had driven across the city. And now he was sitting in the parking lot of a place that smelled like chlorine and dog food, trying to find the energy to open the truck door. People who knew Marcus would later tell me he had not been the same since he came home from his last deployment. He moved slower. He spoke less. He flinched at small sounds. He had not been inside a grocery store in 3 weeks. He had not answered a phone call from his sister-in-law in over a month. He was a man who had been repaired on the outside and shattered on the inside, and he had been walking through his own life like a ghost, trying to figure out who he used to be. The photograph on his refrigerator was the first thing in weeks that had made him feel like getting out of bed had a purpose, and he had driven 47 minutes to find out if that purpose was waiting for him at the end of the hallway. And before I tell you what happened when Marcus walked through that door, I have to tell you how Rex ended up behind that kennel in the first place, because the story of how he got there is uglier than you might be prepared for. The story of Rex began 6 weeks earlier, on a gravel road outside the small town of Socorro, New Mexico. A Socorro County Sheriff's deputy named Eddie Vargas had responded to a 911 call at 11:42 on a Saturday night. The call had come from a passing trucker who had seen dogs fighting in an abandoned limestone quarry just off the highway. When Deputy Vargas arrived at the quarry, he found a scene that would stay with him for the rest of his career. The quarry had been turned into a dogfighting compound. There was a hand-painted wooden sign at the dirt road entrance that read, "Trespassers will be prosecuted to the fullest extent." Of the law, there were bleachers built from old 2x4s. There was a fighting pit carved out of the quarry floor 10 feet across, lined with carpet so old the original color was no longer visible. There were treadmills weighted with chains. There were stacks of medicine bottles meant for humans, including antibiotics, muscle relaxants, and stimulants used to keep dogs hyperalert during long fights. There were tire irons leaning against walls, and there were wire crates, 5 of them. Deputy Vargas moved from crate to crate with a flashlight in one hand and his service weapon in the other. 4 of the crates held dogs that were already dead. They had been dead for hours. Their bodies showed deep lacerations, broken bones, and clear signs of starvation. The 5th crate held a 2-year-old black and tan German shepherd who was barely breathing. He was curled into a tight ball against the wire. His fur was matted with dried blood. His ears were torn so badly that the cartilage was exposed in 2 places. His right eye was swollen completely shut. His rib cage was visible through his skin like the wooden ribs of an overturned shipwreck. Deputy Vargas called for backup. He called for animal control. He called for a veterinarian. He also made a silent promise to the dog in the 5th crate that he would not die alone in that quarry. The dog was transported to a veterinary hospital in El Paso, where a doctor named Amelia Reyes determined that the dog had been used as a bait dog in the operation. Bait dogs are smaller, gentler animals that are placed into fighting pits with trained fighters so the fighters can practice their attacks without risking their expensive breeding investment. Bait dogs almost never survive. They are disposable. They are equipment. They are exactly what Rex had been for at least 2 years before Deputy Vargas found him in that wire crate. The vet stabilized him. She called the El Paso County Animal Shelter to ask if they had space. The shelter had 1 empty run. Rex was transported there the next morning. He was issued a tag number. He was logged into the system as a stray. And under Texas state law, any dog seized in connection with an organized dogfighting operation was automatically classified as a dangerous animal, regardless of whether there was any evidence the dog had ever bitten a human being. That classification set the clock in motion. There were only 2 outcomes available under that classification: rehabilitation at a certified sanctuary that specialized in aggressive breeds, or euthanasia. The sanctuary list had 3 names on it. All 3 sanctuaries refused Rex within 4 days. The first cited lack of kennel space. The second cited the severity of his injuries. The third cited a policy against accepting dogs with confirmed fighting lineage backgrounds. So the clock kept ticking. And on a Tuesday morning in October, with less than 14 hours left on it, the clock brought Marcus Hale to the building where Rex was waiting. In 23 years of rescuing animals, Patricia Domings had seen things that would have broken most people. She had worked with pit bulls whose jaws had been wired shut by their previous owners and forced open with pliers until the bones reset incorrectly. She had rehabilitated horses that had been starved so long their hearts had started to fail. She had fostered animals with wounds so severe she sometimes had to step out of the room just to keep functioning. But Rex broke something inside her she did not know could still be broken. He did not bark when she entered his run. He did not growl. He did not pace. He did not lunge at the kennel gate. He simply stood at the back corner, pressed against the wall, with his eyes half closed and his entire body vibrating at a frequency that could be felt from 3 feet away. When Patricia entered his run to change his water bowl on his 3rd day at the shelter, Rex flinched but did not move. He pressed himself harder into the corner. When the veterinarian approached his kennel with a syringe on his 5th day to draw blood, Rex lowered his head to the floor and exposed the side of his neck. He did not fight. He did not resist. He submitted. Patricia told me later she had never in her career seen a dog do that. She had seen dogs fight in those moments. She had seen dogs bark. She had seen dogs try to bite through the fence. Rex simply offered his neck and waited. He had decided the next blow was coming. He had decided he was tired of bracing for it, and he had decided not to fight it anymore. That was the dog Marcus Hale drove 47 minutes to meet. Marcus knew almost nothing about Rex when he drove through the shelter gate that morning. He did not know about the dog-fighting ring in the quarry. He did not know about the 4 dogs that had died on the carpet that night. He did not know about the bait dog history. He did not know about the torn cartilage in his ears or the bacterial infection M. Oving through his bloodstream. All Marcus knew was a single photograph on a Facebook page and a feeling in his chest that he had been unable to shake for 3 days. He had spent 20 years as a United States Navy SEAL. He had completed 4 combat deployments. He had earned 2 Purple Hearts. He had earned a Bronze Star with Valor for actions during a 2019 engagement in Syria that he had never discussed with anyone outside his unit. He had held dying friends in his arms on 3 different continents. He had carried other friends out of buildings that were collapsing on top of them. He had watched a man named Daniel Pace take his last breath in a wadi in eastern Syria in 2017, and Marcus had been unable to cry for 91 days afterward. He had been the commanding officer of a SEAL team that lost 6 members in an IED strike outside Kandahar in 2021. He had been the man who wrote the letters home to the families. He had signed those letters in a borrowed office on a temporary base with a pen that had run out of ink twice. He had come home 3 weeks earlier, and he had understood immediately what nobody had warned him about before he deployed. He was not the same man who had left. He was not the same man his wife remembered. He was not the same man his daughter had pressed against his chest at the airport and whispered, "Daddy smells different now, and I do not like it." Marcus was finding out what every combat veteran eventually finds out the hard way. The war never really ends. It does not stop when you fly home. It does not stop when you take off your uniform. It does not stop when you sleep in your own bed for the first time in 7 months. The war just changes locations. It moves into your apartment. It moves into your dreams. It sits across from you at breakfast every morning. It stares back at you from the bathroom mirror while you brush your teeth. And it whispers to you in small sounds like the sound a plastic bag makes when the wind catches it on the sidewalk outside, and it tells you to drop to the ground because there is a threat somewhere nearby. Marcus was broken in ways that nobody could see from the outside. He had tried therapy. He had tried medication. He had tried sitting in his apartment alone, staring at the ceiling, willing himself to believe that time would fix everything. Nothing had worked. Nothing had even come close. He had started to wonder if he was ever going to feel like a human being again. And then, 3 days earlier, his thumb had scrolled past a single photograph on a veteran's page. And the dog in the photograph had pressed himself into the back corner of his kennel in exactly the same way Marcus had been pressing himself into the back wall of his apartment every night. And Marcus had felt something he had not felt in 7 months. He had felt recognized. The shelter supervisor tried to talk Marcus out of it before he ever set foot in the kennel hallway. She pulled him aside in the lobby. She was a woman named Sandra Bell, and she had been doing this work for 19 years. She had been the one who had signed the paperwork delaying Rex's procedure by 24 hours. She had spent that extra day calling every rescue contact on her phone list, hoping that one of them would say yes. None of them had. Sandra looked at Marcus and told him about the biting incidents. Rex had bitten 2 staff members in the past 2 weeks. One of those bites had required stitches. Sandra told him about the aggression assessment. Rex had been flagged at the highest possible level on the Canine Behavioral Index, a standardized scoring system used in 31 states. She told him that no certified trainer in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, or Oklahoma would accept Rex as a rehabilitation client. She told him that the only sanctuary that had ever considered him had reversed their decision after a board meeting 2 days earlier. She told him that adopting Rex would require additional legal steps because of his dangerous animal classification. He would have to complete a certified rehabilitation course. He would have to install a 6-foot privacy fence at his own expense. He would have to pass a home inspection within 30 days. He would have to agree to random check-ins from animal control for at least 1 year. She told him there was no guarantee the dog would ever be safe around other people, around other dogs, or around him. She told him he could be risking his life, the life of his neighbors, the lives of any visitors who came to his home, and the life of every animal he would ever encounter again. Marcus listened to every word. He nodded at every warning. He signed every waiver the supervisor put in front of him without reading half of them. He did not hesitate once. He did not ask a single clarifying question. He did not negotiate any of the conditions. And then, after Sandra had finished explaining every legal responsibility he would be taking on, Marcus looked up at her and asked. The only question he had walked into the building to ask. He said, "Where is he?" Stay with me here because what I am about to describe next is going to sound impossible. I want you to understand that I personally interviewed every person who was in that building that morning. I asked each of them the same question. I asked them what they saw. I asked them what they felt. And every single one of them gave me the same answer. Here is what happened next. The shelter supervisor, Sandra, walked Marcus down the long hallway toward the back of the building. The hallway was concrete. The lighting was dim. The kennel doors were steel with chain-link dividers. The smell of disinfectant was overpowering. The sound of dogs barking echoed off every surface. Marcus walked slowly. His boots made soft sounds on the concrete. Sandra walked in front of him with a clipboard in her hands. Every staff member in that hallway took a step back when the final kennel came into view. A woman named Marcy, who had been feeding Rex for the past 2 weeks, walked backward into a supply closet door. A maintenance worker named Tyrone stopped what he was doing and moved all the way across the building. Sandra herself reached for the radio on her belt. Rex was in the last kennel at the end of the hall. The light in his run was dimmer than the others. The concrete floor was cold. He was pressed into the back corner with his body curled into a defensive position so tight his spine was curving. His ears were flat. His lips were pulled back just enough to show the tips of his canines. His eyes were open, but they were not focused. They were tracking movement without registering it. He looked like a weapon someone had forgotten to disarm. Marcus did not speak. He did not make eye contact with the dog. He did what every experienced K9 handler knows to do with a cornered animal. He turned his body sideways. He lowered himself slowly to one knee. He unclenched his hands and let them hang open at his sides. He let out a long, slow breath from the bottom of his lungs. And then he did something that nobody in that building had ever seen a stranger do with Rex. He waited. He did not call to the dog. He did not extend a hand. He did not make a sound. He just knelt on the cold concrete and he waited. The supervisor counted the seconds. She told me later she had counted 14 of them. After those 14 seconds, Rex lifted his head. He looked at Marcus. He did not growl. He did not bark. He did not lunge. He stood up slowly, walked across the kennel floor one paw at a time, and pressed his nose against the chain-link divider. Then he dropped his head. He leaned it sideways against the gate. And every single person in that hallway felt the temperature in the room change. Sandra, who had worked in animal welfare for 19 years and had seen every emotion an animal could show, started crying. She told me later through a voice that was shaking on every word. It was like the dog knew exactly who had just walked through that door. It was like he had been waiting for him, like he had been waiting for him his entire life. Marcy, who was still pressed against the supply closet door on the other side of the hallway, told me, I had been feeding Rex for 2 weeks and he had never once moved toward me. He had never once looked at me. He looked right through me like I was not even in the room. And the second that man dropped to his knee, the dog walked to the gate. I do not have an explanation for it. I have worked with dogs for 11 years and I do not have an explanation for it. Tyrone told me he had served in the Marines for 8 years and he had seen a lot of strange things in his life. But he had never seen anything that moved him the way those 14 seconds had moved him. The shelter recorded video of the entire hallway that morning on the security camera system, and that video still exists. I have watched it 3 times. I have shown it to 4 canine behaviorists, 3 of whom have spent their careers studying animal cognition, and none of them can explain what happens in it either. They can describe the mechanics of what Marcus did. They can describe how lowering his body reduced his perceived threat profile. They can describe how turning sideways reduced his direct eye line. They can describe what Rex's body language meant at each step. But they cannot explain why Rex responded the way he did in 14 seconds to a stranger, after refusing to respond to anyone else for 6 straight weeks. There is no behavioral theory for what happened in that hallway. There is no clinical term for it. There is only what everyone who was there saw with their own eyes, and what everyone who was there will tell you when you ask them. Sandra walked Marcus back to her office after the hallway moment. She closed the door. She sat down across from him. She did not say anything about what had just happened in the hallway because she did not trust herself. Talk about it without crying again. She put the adoption application on the desk in front of Marcus. She told him the truth she had been avoiding telling anyone for the past 3 days. Rex was scheduled for euthanasia at 7:15 the following morning. The paperwork had already been signed by the county-appointed veterinarian at 4:30 that afternoon. The crew that handled end-of-life services at the shelter had been briefed. The procedure room had been prepped. The only reason Rex was still alive was that Sandra, the director, had personally requested 1 extra 24-hour postponement, hoping that someone somewhere would step forward in time. Nobody had stepped forward. Marcus had been the only person to call in 3 days. He had been the only person to walk through the lobby in 7 days. He had been the only person to make it to the back hallway in weeks. Sandra told him all of this. She put the adoption application in front of him with a pen clipped to the top page. She explained again that because of Rex's dangerous animal classification, there were additional requirements. He would need to complete a certified canine rehabilitation course. He would need to install a 6-foot privacy fence at his residence within 30 days. He would need to pass a home inspection. He would need to agree to 2 years of random check-ins from El Paso Animal Control. He would need to carry special liability insurance. He would need to agree that any future bite incident, even one that resulted from clear third-party provocation, could trigger a reclassification review of Rex, which could lead to the original euthanasia order being reinstated. She told him there was no guarantee the dog would ever be safe. She told him he could be risking his life. Marcus picked up the pen. He did not ask any questions. He did not negotiate any of the conditions. He did not pause on any line. He signed every single page, initialed every single box, dated every single line, and he did not lift the pen from the paper between the first signature and the last signature. It took him 43 seconds. When he was done, he set the pen down. He pushed the stack of papers back across the desk to Sandra, and he looked up at her with an expression she would later describe to me as the face of a man who had just remembered why he was still alive. Then he asked one question that nobody in the office could answer. He said, "When can I take him home?" The next part of this story is what makes the whole thing matter, and the next part starts in the back seat of a black pickup truck on a highway heading west across the city. What happened next on the drive home would not make sense to anyone who had not lived through it with their own body. Marcus loaded Rex into the back seat of his pickup truck. He did not put him in a crate. He did not restrain him with a harness. He did not put a muzzle on him. He opened the back door. Rex stood on the running board for a moment, sniffing the air. Then he climbed up into the cab, walked in two tight circles on the seat, lay down with his nose toward the passenger side, and closed his eyes. He was asleep before Marcus had finished closing the truck door. Marcus got into the driver's seat. He started the engine. He pulled out of the parking lot. He turned onto the highway, and then the strangest thing happened. Marcus started crying. He did not know why. He did not know how to describe what he was crying about. The tears started 3 blocks after the shelter, and they did not stop until he pulled into his apartment complex 26 minutes later. Marcus cried the entire way home. He cried through 3 turns. He cried through a stoplight. He cried through a merge onto the interstate. He cried while a song he did not recognize played on the radio. He cried while truckers passed him on the left going 70 miles an hour. He cried while looking at his own hands on the steering wheel. He cried while looking at the dog sleeping in his rearview mirror. He had not cried in 7 months. He had not cried when his best friend Daniel Pace had died in that wadi. He had not cried when the IED had taken out 6 members of his team. He had not cried at the funeral for any of them. He had not cried at his own homecoming. He had not cried when his wife had asked him, in a voice that still broke hers to remember, "Where did you go? You came home, but you are not here." And now, in a pickup truck on a Tuesday morning in October, with a dog he had known for less than 10 minutes sleeping in his back seat, Marcus Hale cried harder than he had ever cried in his adult life. When he pulled into the parking lot of his apartment complex, he sat in his truck for an additional 7 minutes with the engine off, with his hands in his lap, with the dog still sleeping in the back seat, while tears continued to run down his face. Then he wiped his face with the sleeve of his leather jacket. He opened the back door of the truck. Rex lifted his head, climbed down to the running board, and jumped to the ground. And the two of them walked into the apartment together like they had been doing it for years. The first night Marcus and Rex spent together in the apartment was almost entirely silent. Rex walked through every room slowly. He sniffed the corners. He sniffed the baseboards. He sniffed the couch. He sniffed the rug. He sniffed the floor in front of the refrigerator. He sniffed the boots by the door. He sniffed the ledge of the window that overlooked the parking lot. He walked the circuit of the entire apartment once, and then a second time at a slower pace. Then he walked to the couch, climbed onto the cushion at the end, lay down with his nose facing the front door, and closed his eyes. He did not move again for 9 hours. Marcus sat in a chair across the room and watched him. He did not turn on the television. He did not turn on music. He did not pull out his phone. He just watched the dog breathe. And around 11:12 that night, Marcus stood up, walked to the linen closet, pulled out a blanket, walked to the floor in front of the couch, lay down on his side, and went to sleep. He slept for 6 hours without waking. He had not slept 6 hours without waking in 11 months. Rex slept the entire night in exactly the position he had chosen. By the 3rd night, Rex had moved up onto the couch cushion next to where Marcus sat. By the 4th night, Rex had moved up onto the couch next to Marcus's leg. By the 7th night, Rex had moved up onto Marcus's bed. By the 14th night, Marcus had stopped locking his bedroom door. He had been locking it every night since he came home out of habit developed during deployments. The door was his last line of perimeter defense between himself and whatever might be coming. He had been unable to sleep without that perimeter locked. Until Rex started sleeping pressed against his chest like a small child seeking comfort from a nightmare. After that, Marcus did not need the door anymore. After that, the perimeter was not the door. The perimeter was 65 pounds of German Shepherd pressed against his ribcage, breathing slowly, occasionally twitching in his sleep. Something in Marcus had finally recognized that he was not alone in the world. Something the war had stripped out of him had been put back. The transformation of Rex during those first weeks was not just emotional. It was visibly physical in a way that surprised everyone who saw him. Rex gained 11 pounds in the first month. His torn ears began to heal. The infection in his bloodstream cleared up with a single round of antibiotics. He started eating again, and not just eating, but finishing every bowl. He started drinking water without being coaxed. He started looking out the window of the apartment on his own, watching the parking lot below with an alertness the shelter staff had never seen. He started wagging his tail slowly, like he had to remember how, like the muscles were stiff from disuse. He started moving to the door when Marcus put on his boots. He started walking beside Marcus on a leash without pulling or lagging. Marcus started walking Rex 3 times a day. He started taking him to an empty baseball field near his apartment complex at night when the field was empty and running him through basic obedience drills. Rex learned sit in under an hour. He learned stay in under 40 minutes. He learned down in less than 15 minutes. He learned heel in under 2 hours. By the end of the first week, Rex could walk through a crowded farmer's market in downtown El Paso without ever pulling on the leash, without ever showing a single sign of stress, without ever reacting to any of the dozens of other dogs being walked in the same space. By the end of the second week, Rita Delgado, the property manager of Marcus's apartment complex, told him that she had not heard a single complaint from any of his neighbors about his dog. She told him that was unusual for any new tenant, much less one who had adopted a dog from a shelter. 6 weeks after the adoption, Marcus took Rex to a professional canine behaviorist in San Antonio named Dr. Lauren Tate for a formal evaluation. Dr. Tate was told everything about Rex's history before Marcus arrived. She was told about the biting incidents. She was told about the aggression flags. She was told about the bait dog background. She was told about the Level 5 classification. She put Rex through 47 different standardized tests over a 4-hour evaluation period. She tested his reaction to other dogs of varying sizes and breeds. She tested his reaction to loud, unexpected noises, including dropped metal pans, slammed doors, and recorded sounds of fireworks. She tested his reaction to sudden movements in his peripheral vision. She tested his reaction to unfamiliar people entering his personal space. She tested his reaction to food being pulled away from him mid-meal multiple times. She tested his reaction to a stuffed dummy being placed suddenly in front of him while he was eating. She tested his reaction to a hand reaching toward his face from above. She tested his reaction to direct, sustained eye contact from a stranger. She tested his reaction to being physically touched in sensitive areas where the scars from the bait dog operation were most concentrated. At the end of the 4-hour evaluation, Dr. Tate sat down with Marcus in her office. She had a clipboard in her hand. She had notes on every test. She had scores on every behavioral category. She looked at Marcus. She looked back at her clipboard. She set the clipboard down on the desk. She told him something that brought him to tears for the second time in his life. She said, "This is not the same dog the shelter described to me. I do not know what you did. I do not know what happened in those 6 weeks, but whatever it was, it changed him completely. Rex is not aggressive. He is not dangerous. He is a deeply wounded animal who has finally found someone he trusts enough to stop defending himself from." She signed the certification that cleared Rex for public access work as a service animal. She told Marcus that Rex had the temperament, the intelligence, and the resilience to become a PTSD service dog for combat veterans. Marcus signed up for the service dog training course that same afternoon. He had no idea what was about to happen next. Rex became a fully certified PTSD service dog 6 months later. Marcus became his first client. Together on a Tuesday night in March, they walked into a veterans support group meeting at the El Paso VA Medical Center. There were 11 other combat veterans in that room that night. Every single one of them had been struggling with the same things Marcus had been struggling with: the nightmares, the panic attacks, the hypervigilance that never turned off. The feeling of being trapped in their own bodies, the feeling of being unable to explain to their families what was happening inside them, the feeling of being unable to remember why they had survived when so many of their friends had not. Marcus sat down in the corner of the room. Rex lay down at his feet. They did not speak during the first half of the meeting. They did not need to. By the end of the meeting, 4 of those 11 veterans had pulled Marcus aside and asked him how they could get a service dog of their own. By the end of the month, a nonprofit had been launched in Marcus's name under the working title K9s for the Broken, dedicated to matching rescued German Shepherds with combat veterans suffering from PTSD. The founding board included Marcus, Patricia Domings from the El Paso shelter, Dr. Lauren Tate from San Antonio, Sandra Bell from the shelter leadership, and 2 Marine Corps veterans who had been part of that original Tuesday night support group. By the end of the first year, That nonprofit had placed 23 dogs with 23 veterans across 4 states. By the end of the second year, the number had grown to 81. By the end of the third year, the total reached 147 dogs placed with 147 veterans across 11 states, with a 96% successful integration rate and a 0% re-relinquishment rate. Rex became the unofficial mascot of the entire operation. He appeared at every adoption ceremony. He attended every fundraiser. He slept at the foot of Marcus's bed every single night. He toured military bases. He visited Walter Reed. He participated in clinical research studies at 2 universities. He was written about in 3 peer-reviewed journals on the subject of PTSD recovery in combat veterans. And none of it would have happened if the shelter director had not delayed the euthanasia order by 24 hours. The final chapter of this story happened in a federal courtroom in downtown El Paso on the 3rd Tuesday of August, 3 years after Marcus had walked into the shelter. The man who had been running the dog-fighting ring in the quarry near Socorro had finally been tracked down by federal authorities after a multi-year investigation that had crossed 3 countries. He had fled to Mexico 6 weeks after Deputy Vargas had found the quarry. He had spent 3 years living in a small town in Chihuahua under an assumed name. He had been extradited back to the United States in May. He was on trial for 23 counts of animal cruelty under federal statute, 6 counts of organized dogfighting in violation of the Animal Welfare Act, 4 additional federal charges including conspiracy and illegally transporting animals across state lines, and 6 aggravated counts related to the deaths of the 4 dogs found in the quarry that Saturday night. The district attorney was a man named Eduardo Fuentes. He had been trying this case for 3 years. He had built the prosecution file almost entirely on the testimony of witnesses who had been afraid to come forward. He had asked Marcus Hale to testify. Marcus had declined. The district attorney had asked Patricia Domings to testify. She had declined. The district attorney had asked Deputy Vargas to testify. He had declined. The district attorney had told me later that he had been struggling to make the emotional weight of the case land with the jury, because the case was going to hinge on technical testimony about autopsy findings, necropsy reports, veterinary documentation, and extradition paperwork. None of those things would make the jury feel what the witnesses had felt. None of those things would communicate the gravity of what had been done to those dogs, including the one who had survived. And then Fuentes had an idea. He called Marcus the night before the trial started. He asked if Rex, now an official certified service dog, could come into the courtroom. Marcus said yes. The next morning, Rex walked into the federal courthouse on West San Antonio Avenue on a leash held by his handler for the day, a young veteran named Lewis who had been one of the original 4 who had asked Marcus for a service dog 3 years earlier. Rex wore his service vest. He walked at Lewis's side down the center aisle of the courtroom. He stopped when Lewis stopped. He sat when Lewis sat, and he did not move. He did not bark. He did not whine. He did not strain against the leash. He sat in the gallery for the entire morning session of trial testimony. Then at the lunch break, the defendant was brought back into the courtroom for the afternoon session. He had been in custody throughout the trial. He had been escorted into the room. He had walked 22 steps past the gallery railing. He had taken his seat at the defense table. He had looked up. He had seen Rex, and he had broken. He had put his head in his hands. He had not said a single word for the rest of the trial. The jury foreman later told me the defendant had not spoken a single word to his attorney from that moment forward. He had not taken notes. He had not asked questions. He had not objected to anything. He had simply sat with his head in his hands, watching Rex across the room for the rest of the trial. The jury found him guilty on every single count. The judge sentenced him to the maximum penalty allowed under federal law. When the verdict was read, Rex stood up. He walked to the front of the gallery bench. He laid his head on the defendant's attorney's shoes. Nobody in the courtroom could explain what he was doing. The attorney looked down at the dog. The dog looked up at the attorney. Nobody knows why Rex did it. Some people in the courtroom believed it was forgiveness. Some people believed it was Rex simply being Rex, doing what Rex did, which was offering presents to whoever was in front of him, regardless of what that person had done. But every single person in that room agreed on one thing afterward. They had just witnessed something that could not be explained by emotion or training or science or logic. They had witnessed something that changed the way they understood the bond between human beings and the animals who love them. They had witnessed an animal who had been scheduled for death at 7:15 on a Tuesday morning in October, 3 years earlier, walk into a courtroom and offer peace to a man who had been part of the system that had tried to destroy him. And there was not a single person in that room, including the defense attorney whose shoes Rex had rested his head upon, who could look at me straight and tell me what had just happened. But every one of them believed something had happened. And that is the part of this story that has never been publicly disclosed before now. Marcus Hale never went back into combat. He retired from the Navy SEALs 3 months after that Tuesday morning in October. His commanding officer had written him a letter that he kept folded in his desk drawer, never shown to anyone, that said, in part, "Marcus, you have given this country 20 years of service that will never be fully recognized. The bravest thing I ever saw you do was not on any battlefield. It was the morning you walked into El Paso County Animal Shelter after I told you not to. You listened to every warning, you signed every paper, and then you knelt down on a concrete floor and waited for a dog nobody else would touch. I do not fully understand why what you did worked, but I know it worked." Marcus runs K9s for the Broken full-time now. He works 60 hours a week. He coordinates placements, training, fundraising, education, and advocacy. He speaks at VA hospitals, at military bases, at universities, at law schools, at animal welfare conferences. He lives in a modest 3-bedroom house just outside El Paso with Rex, 2 other rescued German shepherds named Casper and Delta, and a cat named Sergeant Whiskers that nobody has been able to explain where it came from. Sergeant Whiskers showed up one morning and simply never left. Marcus has not been able to bring himself to remove the cat because, as he puts it, this house has decided who lives in it. Rex is 14 years old now. His muzzle has grayed. His back legs slow him down on long walks. He does not hear as well as he used to. He sleeps more than he used to. He has started turning down treats that he used to love in a way that breaks Marcus's heart in slow motion every time he sees it. But every Tuesday morning, regardless of the weather, regardless of how Marcus is feeling, regardless of what the world has thrown at them, Rex still walks with Marcus down the hallway of the El Paso VA Medical Center. He still lies down at the feet of a veteran who is struggling. He still waits. He does not bark. He does not perform tricks. He does not demand anything from anyone. He simply waits. And every single veteran who has sat next to him will tell me the same thing. The silence he offers is louder than anything they have ever heard. Louder than the helicopters, louder than the gunfire, louder than the mortar rounds, louder than the IEDs on the road. Rex does not speak. Rex does not need to speak. Rex just sits there. And in that sitting, something inside the people around him begins to settle. So what do we make of a story like this? How do we explain a dog the entire state of Texas had written off? How do we explain an animal whose life was ending in less than 14 hours when Marcus drove up to that shelter and signed those papers? How do we explain a dog who then went on to be part of saving more lives than most human beings will ever touch? How do we explain what happened in that courtroom? How do we explain why Rex laid his head on the shoes of the man defending the person who had helped create the system that destroyed him? There is no easy answer. There is no clean moral. There is no 12-step program that produces what happened in the back of that shelter on that Tuesday morning in October. There is only one thing I know for certain, after spending 6 months putting this story together and speaking to every person involved. The shelter supervisor, Sandra Bell, told me something the last time I spoke with her that I have not been able to get out of my head since. She said, "We almost killed an angel because we were afraid of him." She paused. She looked out the window of her office at the parking lot where Marcus had parked his truck 3 years earlier. Then she said, "Some of us are still trying to forgive ourselves for that, and I think some of us will be trying for the rest of our lives." And if that does not make you think about every assumption you have ever made about another living creature, then I do not know what else will. Marcus told me one more thing I want to leave you with. He said the day he met Rex was the first day after coming home from his last deployment that he understood what he had actually been fighting for all those years overseas. He said it was not the country. It was not the flag. It was not democracy or freedom or any abstract idea. It was the willingness to walk into a room where everyone else had already given up. The willingness to kneel down on a cold floor in front of a dog everyone had written off and just wait. The willingness to remain open when every rational voice in the room was telling you that you should close. And he said Rex taught him that. Rex taught him that broken things do not always break the way we think they are going to break. Rex taught him that some broken things, when given the right moment and the right witness, will lean sideways against the gate and drop their heads and offer trust. Now you have heard the entire story. You have heard about the dog marked for death and the warrior who refused to let him go. You have heard about the hallway, the paperwork, the drive home, the long nights, the transformation, the service dog certification, the nonprofit, the courtroom, and the moment Rex laid his head on those shoes. So I have to ask you, What would you have done if you had been Marcus that morning? What would you have done if you had driven into that parking lot and read every warning the supervisor had given you and signed every paper anyway? Would you have walked down that hallway and knelt on that concrete floor and waited 14 seconds for a dog no one else would touch? Or would you have walked away and let the next hour finish what that quarry had started 6 weeks earlier? Be honest with me in the comments below. I read every single comment. I respond to as many as I can. And your answer might be the one that helps the next person who reads this thread make a decision they have been putting off for years. If this story moved you, hit the like button right now. It is a small thing that takes less than half a second, but it tells the algorithm that stories about healing and redemption matter. Share this video with one person who needs to hear it. May. Be it is a veteran who is struggling and has not told anyone yet. Maybe it is somebody who is about to give up on a rescue animal of their own. Maybe it is just a friend who has had a hard year and could use a reminder tonight that broken things can heal in ways we do not fully understand. Subscribe to this channel and turn on the bell, because next week I am releasing a story about a Marine who adopted a horse from a kill pen in Louisiana, and what that horse did for him during a Category 5 hurricane in 2020 will stay with you for the rest of your life in ways you cannot prepare for. And finally, comment the word Rex below if you believe, even a little, that what happened in that kennel on that Tuesday morning was something bigger than any of us can fully explain. I will see you in the next one. Stay brave, stay kind, and never stop fighting for the ones nobody else is willing to fight for, because that is the only thing that has ever changed anything worth changing.